it! Just do it! Don't let your dreams be dreams. Yesterday, you said tomorrow, so just do it! Make your dreams come true! Just do it!
Welcome to Successful Dropout. This podcast is for the outliers, the innovators, the rebels, those that dare to dream and act on their dreams. I'm your host, Kylan Ginger. Join me as we find out what it takes to drop out, grind, and succeed. This episode is brought to you by Praxis. Guys, if you've been listening for a while and you're inspired to drop out, grind, and succeed and to start turning your dreams into reality, Praxis helps you go from student to startup in just 9 months, okay? To land your dream job or to start your own company, you don't need to sit in more classrooms or blast out resumes or go through years of training. You can start today. Praxis combines a 3-month professional bootcamp with a 6-month paid apprenticeship at a startup that leads directly to a full-time job. And startups aren't just for coders, by the way. There's sales positions, marketing, operations. Even if you're not sure what you're interested in, Praxis places you with a growing, dynamic company where you get paid to do work you love to do, where you get to become part of a team, and where you learn how to create value. It's not just an internship, it's real work. In addition to the apprenticeship, you complete an intensive education program that combines professional development training, skill building projects, and one-on-one coaching. You'll leave the program with a full-time job offer and the skills and experiences you'll need to work for any company that you want to work for or to even start your own company. No degree is required to get started on your career, guys. Whether you're an ambitious go-getter right out of high school, a creative thinker who's bored in college, or a college grad looking forward to something better than more school or a cubicle job, Praxis is a phenomenal resource for you. $50,000. Okay, $50,000 is the average salary that Praxis graduates are getting with these full-time jobs that they get right after the program in less than a year. If you want to learn more, go to discoverpraxis.com, discoverpraxis.com, and let them know that you found out about them through Successful Dropout and start turning your dreams into reality, guys. And with that being said, let's get to the show. What is up, Successful Dropouts? Get stoked because today on the show we have Zachary Slayback. Zach is an entrepreneur who writes on issues of education, innovation, and philosophy. He's an Ivy League dropout who speaks regularly on education, college, how and why to foster more entrepreneurship, and issues related to professional development. He believes that entrepreneurs are the primary actors of social change. Zach is also a founding team member of Praxis, and he is one of LinkedIn's most influential voices on education in 2015 and has been published in Newsweek, the Newark Examiner, the Daily Caller, the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and Christian Science Monitor, the Foundation for Economic Education's Anything Peaceful, and many other publications. He has also appeared on the Glenn Beck program and Huffington Post Live. So Zach, that's the intro I have for you, man, but tell us a bit more about yourself and what you do.
Hey, Colin. I am, like you noted, I'm the business development director for Praxis, or founding team member. So I spend most of my time with Praxis. You know, I know you've had some of the Praxis people, some of our peeps, some of our alumni on the show. So Praxis is a 9-month apprenticeship program where we take young people, 18, 25 or so, and we give them awesome jobs, help them accelerate their careers and bypass the collegiate process altogether. Beyond that, you know, I do a lot of stuff in education. I've got my fingers in a couple different startups and a couple different startup projects. And I would consider myself someone who just has to always be doing something.
So the regular listeners on the show, they remember our interviews with Derek McGill and, of course, Isaac Morehouse. And so you are a founding team member. How did that come about, and what's kind of the role that you play now with Praxis?
Yeah, so let's go back. We have to go back in the time machine, back to 2013 or so.
Perfect.
So I was in college. I would have been a sophomore at the University of Pennsylvania, and I was doing well. You know, that summer I had gotten a research fellowship that allowed me to essentially like sit on the beach and read philosophy books and then like write about philosophy and send it back to a professor. It was actually a really cushy
nice.
job. Total aside, I saw somebody the other day make a comment on one of my friend's posts. My friend was making this point about academia. And this guy who made this comment essentially tried to say that academia is a really, really hard place to be. You have committee meetings and you have students and you have research. And I just thought to myself, I'm like, wow, my experience with academia is it's the cushiest possible place that anyone could have a career.
Interesting.
But I went back to school in the fall and I was ridiculously antsy, right? And I was actually in the Praxis focus group when Isaac, our CEO, was founding the company and putting it together. And I remember that he had talked about this and he was doing a little bit of things here and there with it, accepting some of his early applications. And I went to him and I told him, let me work for you for free. That's all you need to let me do. I am going crazy. On the weekends, after school, just like let me do something so I don't just go bonkers. And he let me do that. He took me up on that offer. And after a couple months, I did end up making some money. I was talking to Isaac yesterday and he said, well, I think I originally literally sent you peanuts in the mail. I can't remember. I probably had some sort of malnutrition that kept me from remembering. But I ended up joining him full time that summer because I realized I could either do school and Praxis and do both very mediocrely, do both poorly, or I could build Praxis, do it well, or I could go to school and do it well. And of those three options, I chose that I wanted to go join Isaac building Praxis. So I moved down to Charleston, worked with him for a little bit. It was originally a leave of absence. As we started to grow, we raised a little bit of money here. We kept growing. I shifted roles into our business development role. And I remember one day I was just sitting in our office that we had down here, which was mostly just Isaac and me at the time. And I looked over at him and I said, I don't think I'm going to go back to school. And it just kind of hit me. I was like, why would I go back to a place where I was not particularly fulfilled, where I was not learning things at the rate that I like to learn things, which is faster than the classroom provides for. Yeah. I was paying a lot of money, even with financial aid, I was still paying a lot of money, and I was just generally less fulfilled. Why would I do that to myself? So the question for me was, why was I in school in the first place? Originally, I wanted to be an academic, which again, if you want a really cushy, ridiculously easy job, I say go for that. But if you actually want to be challenged, if you actually want to grow professionally, if you actually want to create value in not just the workforce, but the economy as a whole, I think you have to push yourself outside of academia.
Were you homeschooled?
There's a bit of a long-winded answer. I'm sorry.
No, that's great. No, I love it. Were you homeschooled at all, like Isaac?
No, I was not.
So how did your friends and family react to that then when you made that decision? My dad was a little more receptive. I made my case to him and just explained to him, what I was doing, that I was taking a leave initially, and that if I wanted to go back, I could. And then when I decided I would drop out, I explained to him like why I was doing that, that I was joining this growing company, we were being successful, that I was learning better than I had learned before, all these kinds of things. And he's actually been great. He's been very supportive. Other family members of mine didn't quite get it. And I occasionally write about when you're dealing with family members that you'll get like this 9-paragraph email from an aunt that you didn't talk to in like 4 years. Totally.
I actually did receive that email. I have an aunt on one of my side of my family. Like all my aunts and uncles are like doctors and lawyers, and I don't think any are actually lawyers, but they're all like academics, right? They have 10 different credentials. Yeah. So I received a lot of unsolicited advice from that side. And eventually at the end of the day, though, you have to realize if you have family support, that's great. It's really, really helpful. And if you don't have family support, I'm really sorry that you find yourself in that position, but your family and your parents don't run your life. I was just talking to somebody else the other day about, I find that so many young people today are not nearly as ambitious as they could be. And I think part of that is they're raised in an environment where ambition is a dirty word. Where, you don't want to be too ambitious because you got to be realistic. Let's be realistic here, right? And the only piece of advice I can eventually give someone at the end of the day is, look, you can debate, you can remonstrate with your parents, with your family, with your close friends and family, all these other people, but they don't own your life. At the end of the day, it is something you have to choose. And at risk of sounding a little on the self-helpy side, I'm somebody who I really, really one of the few things I fear is regrets. So even with school, right? This is one of the more useful pieces of advice I think that you can think of if you're trying to talk to a young person about leaving school. You can always go back.
Yeah.
Like if I wanted to go finish my last 2 years, I could. There's no law that says you have to graduate by the time you're 23 or 24, or you can never go back to school.
Yeah.
And even if you find out you don't want to go back, this is an odd objection I hear from parents a lot, which is, well, what if, little Johnny goes and he works at this company and he loves it for a year and then he decides he doesn't want to go back to school, like as a gap year or something like that. And the answer is good.
So what?
Yeah. You saved him 4 years of his life, or he saved himself 4 years of his life and a bunch of money and a bunch of, honestly, like hoop jumping. So again, a bit of a tangent, but I was fortunate to have one supportive family member, several. My uncle also was supportive. Both my dad and my uncle were like, look, we understand that the workforce has entirely changed since when we were in school, that the way that you guys are doing this with Praxis is probably the way forward. This makes a lot of sense. They're both airline pilots, and although a lot of airlines do require you to have a degree, that's changing. And they both will admit,
Really?
We didn't use degrees.
Wow. Is it going to be more apprentice-based or something like that? Actually, that's a question I had as far as things that legally require a degree right now, or you have to get a degree, like law, a lot of science, stuff like that. Where do you think that's headed in the future?
Well, law is a state-by-state issue. I don't know how it stands today, but I know at least a couple of years ago, some states allowed you to be admitted into law school and then take the bar exam without a bachelor's degree. So same with medicine. I think all 50 states now require you to have a bachelor's degree, but one of the presidential candidates in this last cycle actually does not have a bachelor's degree and is an MD. So I think what you're going to see in those industries, you're going to see a lot of disruption in those industries for a couple of reasons. And it's not just credentials. One, you do get a credentialing bubble, and we've seen this in law. There's a small contraction in law over the last couple of years where it's a lot harder to get a good job as a lawyer. And a lot of law schools, it was revealed their employment percentages that they were putting out there. They were employing a lot of their own graduates. So actually, many fewer of their grads were actually getting good jobs in law. And colleges will do this as well, where they'll say, 90% of our graduates get jobs within 6 months of graduation. Well, yes, but 20% of those work for you. So how valid is that statistic? So medicine I'm not as concerned about, because I actually think that in the United States in general, you're going to, despite the fact that the population is aging, you're going to have many fewer doctors. That's because of artificial intelligence. That's because of automation. That's because of a couple other things like that. I think you're going to have many fewer corporate attorneys as well. It's not going to go away entirely, but if you just think of it from the perspective of, say, someone who runs a medical clinic, if you could employ 10 doctors or 10 physicians, 10 physicians or 10 nurse practitioners, people like that, or you could sign up for a service that is based on IBM's Watson that can do diagnoses 50% better than real doctors can, which that's a real statistic, which is terrifying next time you go to the doctor. Which are you going to do, right? You're probably going to employ one or two head doctors to sign off on diagnoses that are done by Watson or by the Watson-like service. Same with law. So your doctors and lawyers aren't going to go away. There's just going to be many fewer of them, I think, in the next couple decades. So I'm just honestly just not as concerned about that.
Yeah.
Aviation, obviously aviation's been a field that has been automating more and more over the last couple decades as well. You used to have, 3-4 people in the cockpit of an airplane. Now you only have 2. Because of liability reasons, I don't think you're going to see airplanes be fully automated for a little while. You're always going to want to have a person there. However, what you are seeing is that there are so few pilots. We're actually experiencing a pilot shortage.
Oh, really?
Because you not only do you have to get a degree, or did you have to get a degree, you then also need to go through getting a pilot's license. And all these hours, which is essentially an apprenticeship, right? You have to go get a certain number of hours working very closely with someone who's done these things, and you have to get all your different type ratings, and you need to go through a couple more certifications, and it's very, very costly and expensive. So what you're seeing more companies. JetBlue, for example, has set up an academy where they'll take people without college degrees and train them up to become airline pilots.
Now, Zach, you're really plugged into the higher education industry and kind of where that's headed, and you touched on it a bit, but could you speak briefly to that?
Yeah, so higher education, we're seeing 2 things. Higher education at the end of the day is not about education. The secret of higher education is that nobody actually goes to college for an education. You can test this empirically. I do it all the time. Go to any college classroom, give a talk on this topic, and ask the students, how many of you would be here if you had to spend as much time as you have to spend, as much money as you have to spend? You'd still learn the things you're learning. That's an important thing to throw in there. Be charitable. You'd still learn the things that you are learning, but you get no credential at the end of the day. I have only ever, and this is after giving this talk, versions of this, thought experiment to hundreds, if not over 1,000 students at this point, I've only ever maybe had 5 people raise their hands. And that's it. That is consistent regardless of the kind of college you go to. Whether you're at a small regional college, you're at a community college, or you're at an Ivy League university, that is consistent. And what I tell those people who raise their hands is, great, you should be academics. College is designed, higher education is designed to create academics. And it is an apprenticeship system for academics. That's what it is. And that's just the way to understand it. People are there for credentials. People are there for tickets to jobs. The most disruptive companies in higher education today are hopefully Praxis, but they're not, Coursera and Udemy and all these MOOCs. They're Google and LinkedIn. I can learn more about somebody by Googling them. I learn more about you by looking at your website than I don't know. Did you go to college?
No.
I don't even know. Yeah, I would assume not with the podcast,
right.
But I wouldn't have even known, right? And I tell people, whether they're college freshmen or dropouts, build a damn good LinkedIn page. It's not that hard to do. Most of them are really crappy. It's really easy to actually get a really good looking LinkedIn page. Build your own personal website. It can even be on like Weebly or WordPress. And I will learn more about you then than you telling me I have a degree from Harvard, or I have a degree from Michigan, or I have a degree from Florida Gulf Coast University. So what you're seeing, once we understand that that's how higher education works, what you see is 2 things happening at once, right? We're experiencing a lot of degree inflation in the United States today. There are more janitors with chemistry degrees than there are chemists. So what we have is, it's a lot harder for companies to differentiate people based on their credentials. When everybody has a degree, then the degree becomes entirely worthless. It's like the high school diploma. At the same time, you have, so companies can move in 2 directions, right? They can do what companies that actually have real pressure on them to do have to do, real pressure on them to survive have to do, which is remove the credential. You're seeing more and more companies say, bachelor's degree or 4 years work experience, or equivalent work experience, actually.
Right.
I was talking to a Praxis business partner out in Phoenix once, right? I went in there, cold pitched this company on hosting a Praxis participant, and that's how they had their job postings on their website. And I asked the guy, what do you mean by equivalent work experience? And he looks at me exasperated, and he's just like, honestly, this is in Phoenix, where you have Arizona State University, one of the largest universities in the country, right? Yeah. He tells me a semester working in a real company is more impressive to me than 4 years of an advertising degree or a marketing degree. And I find that more and more often. In the 3 years we've been doing this, I find this much more often. So you see that in one direction. I'm really optimistic about that. In the other direction, you have some companies, much stodgier companies that are mostly run by bureaucrats and HR people, requiring more credentials in order to get hired. I've seen unpaid internships that require a master's degree. I've seen a paid internship, but still an internship, that requires that you are a PhD student in mathematics.
Dang.
For a finance company. That's not sustainable. That just simply is not sustainable.
Wow.
So what I think you're going to see is you're going to see less and less emphasis on the credential, because the credential is a tool, right? It is a market mechanism that has developed in order to tell people, is this somebody that you should work at? It's a filtering mechanism. However, it's a really, really blunt tool. And as more and more people get them, it becomes a blunter and blunter tool. Imagine like just using a knife over and over and over again to the point that the knife is really just like a piece of metal that you're hitting against like a flank of steak that you're trying to cut. What you're going to see more often is you're going to see experience, because you can show off experience much more easily on your LinkedIn, on your resume, on your Facebook, on your personal website, all these things. Just experience taking you a lot further. You're going to see assignments and entry exams at jobs. We've had Praxis business partners who they don't even ask once if the participant has a degree or even considered going to college. They just give them an assignment. This happened today. One of our business partners sent 2 of our participants an assignment on doing sales work. And based on how they do on that assignment, plus their interview, that's how they figure out, should we hire this person?
Wow.
It's much, much easier to do that when you don't have to like send it by certified mail across the country, right? Because we have this magical thing called the internet.
Imagine that.
Yeah, imagine that. And then also what I think you're going to see is you're going to see more companies that actually offer specific services that are important to other companies, offer their own micro credentials. Amazon does this with Amazon Web Services. Salesforce does this. I'm sure Oracle does this. A lot of software companies do it. I think you're going to see it in other areas as well. Also long-witted.
No, it's good.
Big subject that you can really unwind.
Yeah, love it. No, thanks for that. And this is kind of another possibly loaded question that's a bit off of the interview flow here, but
you can feel free to like cut me off at any time too. If it's like, okay, this guy, you're talking way too quickly, there's way too much here, I'm going to cut you off and we'll move on to something else.
No, I mean, the reason I'm going kind of off the regular flow here is because, I mean, you're kind of an expert on this, at least I would consider you to be, and so do our listeners. So I think getting as much of this info out of you as possible is good. And in relation to that, I wanted to ask you, in your opinion and based on your experience for the benefit of those listening, and you kind of touched on it a bit, but in your opinion, what kind of person should probably stay in college and what kind of person should just drop out and they're most likely wasting their time and money?
I think it's a much more productive question to ask who should stay in college, because I think that most people should not.
Okay. So who should stay?
I love these. I love this question because how it's usually couched is some professor somewhere saying, well, yeah, we never said college is for everybody. And then the same professor then gets on Facebook and then complains about their students on Facebook publicly and like mocks them. And it's like, wow. In any other industry, can you imagine like Tim Cook getting on Facebook and like complaining about Apple customers? Yeah. That it's just totally ridiculous. And it's such a ridiculously entitled, entrenched profession. Total aside there. But if you want to be an academic, that is the one area I think staying in academia is probably a must. But I want to differentiate between being an academic and being an intellectual. Being an academic is being in this highly credentialized cartel. And there are some very good academics out there who are very productive and they do very good things in academia. If you want to be a professional intellectual, one, you can do that kind of as a side gig at any other job you have. Two, this magical thing that allows you and I to be, talking to each other from thousands of miles away across a couple time zones also allows people to disseminate information. Yeah. And as it's getting more and more refined, being an intellectual online is not the same thing as being some kind of crank that's just putting out like tinfoil hat theories on the internet. I have a friend, Steve Patterson, who Steve is an independent philosopher. He doesn't have a degree in philosophy. He doesn't work in academia. He doesn't work with any specific institution. And he is a professional philosopher. And you're going to see more and more people like that in the coming years. So if you want to be an academic, then you should stay in academia. If you're like my age, if you're 22, 23, I might say if you want to be a doctor, go to med school, because I do think that Watson displacement is probably a decade off. I'm an automation and AI optimist. I think it will be a great thing, and I think it's going to happen faster than we think. However, I mean, even then, if you're like 22, 23 years old, you're going to go to med school for what? Med school is 4 years, and then you have to do an internship, then you have to do a residency.
It's like 8 years.
By the time you get out, by the time you get out, you're already going to start being displaced. And even if you're not displaced by machines, right? You're going to be displaced. Let's say you're a surgeon, right? It seems like, surgeon's a really hard job to displace. Once Google figures out Google Fiber well enough, that the bandwidth between the lag between like Pittsburgh and Mumbai is essentially nothing. Wow. We're going to be outsourcing doctors because we already have machines that allow you to do surgeries remotely, but you just have to do them pretty much in the same building because there's so much lag. So even if you want to be a doctor, if you want to be a doctor, why do you want to be a doctor? Is it because you want to help people? Is it because you want to make money? Is it because you're interested in medicine? Well, you can become a medical entrepreneur. Well, if you want to make money, there's a lot of other ways, a lot of better ways to make money. If you want to help people, there are other ways of doing that as well. So yeah, if you want to be an academic, that's about it.
Love it.
And if you truly have no ambition, no skills, and you have to work with what is projected upon you as a brand name, I think that if you are an above average, if competency is a bell curve, right, and you fall on the right side of the bell curve, you are actually hurt by staying in college. If you're on the left side of that bell curve, the signaling value of the college degree right now is probably just still positive enough that it would help you if you're on the left side. If you're on the right side, though, when I meet someone and they have an English degree and $35,000 in debt and they're working Starbucks or like a barely paid fellowship.
Oh man, yeah.
I can't help but wonder, like, why would I hire you? Like, what kind of life decisions do you make? And this all sounds harsh. I'm sorry. This sounds ridiculously harsh, but we need to stop being mamby-pamby around this.
Yep.
Higher education has become a religion in this country, and we need to be honest that it is not the best way for most people to become educated, and in fact, it actually runs into most people's educations. It stymies it.
So really quick, actually, you mentioned signaling theory, and Isaac talked a little bit about that. Can you speak briefly to that and what that is? Because I think that'd be a great refresher.
Yeah, without getting too much into the weeds of it, there's this idea. There's a couple of different ideas in higher education, right? On like the value of a college degree or the value of higher education. Yeah. And I kind of hinted at this earlier when I talked about the thought experiment that I give students when I go to classrooms. And the one idea, the one that you'll find in like high school guidance offices and like your parents will tell you, and professors don't even like imagine that it's true. It's always like the people who have an incentive to market college. It's not even like the professors. Is the human capital theory of higher education, which is that you send people to college and they learn skills. They become more skilled and they go into the workforce and they apply those skills and they become more productive as a function of picking up those skills. There have been numerous studies that have shown that this just simply is not true. Even in areas like computer science, it's still not true, because usually what happens is computer science students go and they get a summer internship, which might have been acquired based on the signaling value of the credential through the institution that they're getting that they're pursuing that degree at. So what signaling theory says is that it's a filtering mechanism, right? If I'm an employer and I get 100 applications, I need to filter through them. I need a heuristic. I need a shorthand way of getting through all those applications. Long time ago, that would have just been a high school diploma. As everybody got a high school diploma because of the GI Bill, because of all these other things going on in the mid to late 20th century, it becomes the college degree. And as more and more people get the college degree, it's either going to become a master's degree or it's going to become experience. It has to become something. But what we're also able to do, again, with with the internet, where I don't actually need to pay someone to literally just throw away resumes, we're actually able to filter through people's resumes much more easily. So the signaling theory says that people go to college, and the value that they get from college, because you always hear these guys, you'll earn $1 million more over your career, which we can dismantle those if you haven't already. That's not because those people are becoming more productive. It's because those people have signaled themselves into positions that are more likely to pay more. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Imagine it like a filter. I think filtering theory is a better term, but I'm not an economist.
Can you, now you mentioned, and I am going way off, but I think this is gold. I have seen those studies all over the internet where they say that college grads on average earn X amount more and stuff. So if you can debunk those, I think that would be really valuable.
Oh yeah, I love those theories those studies because
I'm curious. I don't even know.
I love them because it shows that whoever wrote the article or whoever even did the study is probably like a statistician, but never actually took like a high school stats class. One of the few classes that was actually really valuable for me in high school was my stats class, because my stats professor explained to me, you need to understand the context of any statistics. There are lies, there are damn lies, and there are statistics. With those statistics, and I saw a similar one today from the Brookings Institution, I was like, if you go to college, you're more likely to live longer, right? Which living longer is a function of wealth, usually. So that's probably what that's connected to. I didn't read the article. I didn't take any blood pressure pills today. I am not actually on blood pressure pills. But no, I mean, let me reframe. Let me show you what's wrong with these studies by reframing it in a different way, right? Yeah. Studies show that 90% of people who own Ferraris have a net worth over $1 million. Studies show that 90% of people who have retirement accounts over $2 million are more likely to live longer. Things like that, right? The Ferrari one in particular. Studies show that people who have maybe after the subprime mortgage crisis, I don't know if this would even still be true, but studies show that people who own homes that are worth more than $3 million are more likely to be wealthy. Well, everyone should go buy a home, because if you buy a $3 million home, it's going to make you wealthy. Oh, everyone needs to go buy a Ferrari, because if you buy a Ferrari, it's more likely to make you wealthy. Or we can even dumb it down a little bit further and just say like home ownership. Like this is an actual like stupid myth that was promulgated in the United States in the 90s, because there was a strong incentive, and this is not conspiratorial stuff. This is out there. You can go read this. There was a strong incentive for the parties at play to get people to buy homes. So if you told people buying a home is going to lead to like economic independence, no, what leads to economic independence is wealth. That's it. Yeah. Buying a home does not lead to wealth. It goes the other way around. Yeah. The same thing with the college degree. Earning money does not come as a function of earning the college degree. It's that colleges select for one, if you're not a first generation college student, chances are you already came from a family that's a little better off than the average. Secondly, colleges purposely select for people who they know are going to be successful. That person who has that degree is going to be successful regardless of whether or not they have that degree. This is something that I think, we were talking about ambition at the beginning of this conversation. If any of your listeners are listening to this and they feel like they were much more ambitious or had much more ambition and drive when they were in high school and now they're in college, I'm really talking to you here. Colleges purposely select people who they know are going to be successful, because then they can go back later and they can say, look at our successful alumni. Or they can go back to them and just ask them for donations, period. Huh. Put yourself in the shoes of the college admissions officer, right? The college admissions officer has two strong incentives. They throw this idea that colleges are nonprofit out the window too. They have a profit motive. That profit motive is simply to increase their endowment in the short term and the long term. In the short term, they need two things. They need students that they can trot out in front of alumni and donors, and the donors will be like, I'm so proud of my institution. Here's a check so you can support this great young person. And someone that they can also, put on the phones to actually call up families. I remember at Penn, a lot of the work study programs were actually working in the Penn call center So your parents or you were paying for you to go there so that you can call people to pay you to pay the university more. It is totally absurd. In the long term, they want to select people who they think are going to be successful regardless, because that means they'll become donors, right? And if they have a decent experience, if they associate that success with their experience in college, they're more likely to give that money back.
Yeah, makes sense.
Right? I mean, I was thinking about this earlier today, where I'm thinking about, okay, what kind of charitable donating do I want to do for the rest of the year? And I think about the organizations that have like had me in as a speaker before, and I'm more likely to want to donate to them because I don't know whether or not I would be successful with them. I probably would have been regardless, but I just have that association in my mind. So one, there's this convoluted context of the statistic saying that you're going to earn more because of the degree. No, the type of person who can finish that degree is more likely to earn more money. Not because they have that degree, though. That's really, really important. The other thing is the university knows this. Universities are very well aware. I've talked to college recruiters. I've talked to a college recruiter who works for Penn, where I dropped out of. And he has told me this. He's told me point blank. He's like, you know what? We want you to be successful regardless, and we know you will be. That's how this works.
Yeah.
It's not a conspiracy. It's just incentives. So I guess there are a couple issues there. One, just basic statistics, and secondly, like understanding the incentives at play for the admissions department of the university.
Yeah. Yeah, great stuff. Thanks for giving us an insight into that, because I see that everywhere. Now, going more back to talking specifically about you, what was one of the fears that you had, one of the biggest fears that you had dropping out, or I guess in your case, just deciding not to go back, and how did you manage that?
Yeah, the only major fear was, when I dropped out to join Praxis, we were still like a really early stage startup. We're like blowing up now. We get more people submitting applications in a week than we got in like 6 months when we originally launched. And I was talking to Isaac about this yesterday, and I asked him. He's got like 4 mouths to feed, 3 children, and his wives. His wife's. He doesn't have multiple wives. And like, how was he able to sleep at night knowing that? And for me, it was like, I don't even have that going on. And I'm still like, what happens if we don't make it through the next quarter? Yeah. Which, looking back, that just seems silly now, because again, we're growing immensely quickly. I think that if somebody came and was like, I want to invest in you, that would be Isaac's call, but I don't think we're in a position where we would need to take money, which is a great position to be in as a startup. But even then, I'd say that there was also, it was like, look, even if we failed, as the business development director, especially as I moved more into this role, I am connected to 300 businesses all across the country, some of the fastest growing in the country. And I've developed skills through working in this position that could probably land me a job that probably honestly even pays better at any of those companies if we failed. Yeah. So I am someone, trust me, I am very much someone who's very kind of like A-type and kind of like thinking through all the plans. And I've trained myself to be risk averse, which is actually like, I think, rather unfortunate. And I think way too many people do that. But when I actually just say this aloud, answering your question, I realize like what was the downside? The downside is, you've spent 2 years doing something amazing that most people will never be able to do. Now you go back to school, or now you go get a great paying sales job or something. And that's not because I'm awesome. That's just because of like the skills you pick up at something like this.
Yeah. Zach,
it's kind of a non-answer, but
no, it's good stuff. Zach, what's a personal habit that you believe contributes to your success?
Can I say 2?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go for it.
One, and this is one that I picked up largely from Isaac. However, I noticed it in other people, is writing once a day for a set period of time. If you choose to write for 35 days, 30 days, 6 months, whatever it is, one, creation begets creation. You're just going to create more things. You're going to get more ideas. You're going to just become more creative. During that period, I had like multiple ideas for different startups, some of which, I went and I found some of my good friends who could actually help me build them. And we built up a prototype. And then we decided that we were going to shelve in all these other things, right? It led to all these new opportunities. 2, because I was consumption also begets creation if it's combined with creation.
Huh.
Because I was consuming so much on the topic of education, I was writing a lot about education. The end of that like 35, 45 days is now my book, The End of School. It's a culmination of all of those writings. And at the end of that month or so, people started referring to me as an expert on higher education, as an expert on education. And I don't have any of the credentials, right? I actually have like no credentials,
yeah.
right? I never done like a formal research project in academia on the subject of education. But people started coming to me like that because I was producing so much. So that habit. And then the other one that I travel a lot as a function of my work, and this is really, really hard to do while traveling. But if you can do it, I love doing this, and I see my productivity spike like crazy. Is waking up before everybody else. So, you don't need to be this person who like wakes up at like 4:30 every morning and only eats kale and does all these things, right? But look at it. Look, if you're a high functioning person, you're probably going to be really busy and you're probably interacting with a lot of people. If you want to also like go to the gym and write and learn, then you need to make those things fit into all your interactions with other people if you don't wake up before everybody else. If you wake up before everybody else, while the rest of the world is asleep, you can actually be working. That, I think, is actually ridiculously useful and ridiculously powerful. I am much more productive from about 4:45 in the morning to about 8 than I am for the rest of the day.
What's a quality or trait that you have that you would consider essential to entrepreneurship?
Quality or trait that I have, I can say my wonderful looks. No, that was a really bad joke. I apologize. I would say restlessness. I noted at the beginning, I consider myself extremely restless. Now it needs to be focused restlessness, right? Because otherwise you just like go out and you start everything and you don't finish anything.
Right.
Which I've like started things, and then not finished them, and that kills me. But restlessness in the sense that you have to always be moving forward and you have to always be doing something. So, my colleague Isaac, when he founded Praxis, he worked for like 6 months in his other job, but every single day he did something to advance Praxis. Yeah. For me, every single day I do something to advance my financial well-being. I do something to advance my entrepreneurial well-being, my spiritual well-being, and my physical and emotional well-being. And if I don't do that, I get ridiculously antsy.
So you just got to be always moving forward.
I'm fascinated with people who have a bias for action because I actually am convinced, and I need to like do a little bit more case studies on this to really get this down solid. But I'm convinced that it's almost a natural trait for people, and then it's trained out of us. But everybody I know who is successful, and my job is literally to interact with successful people. Yeah. Is that they have the one trait that they all have is that they have a bias for action.
Interesting.
And I think you develop that bias for action by just like being restless.
Now, kind of on a quick side note here, I'm curious, do you have like a tendency to focus on too many things at once, or you figure out a way to really narrow? Because I know that doing that can really hurt productivity and progress.
Yeah, I do. And this is another question, right? Is that something that comes natural to that kind of personality type, or is that something that's kind of trained into us? I think it's actually kind of trained into us because, especially if you're like a high-functioning young person in high school, you have to be well-rounded for the college admissions officers. You have to do all these things at once, right?
Interesting.
Peter Thiel talks about this in his book 0 to 1, that young people focus on becoming so well-rounded by the time push comes to shove, they end up being prepared for nothing in particular. They're prepared for lots of things, but nothing actually in particular. So I think focus along with restlessness is very, very important. For me, the way that I have, honestly, the best way that I have developed focus is just having a couple monumental burnouts over the last couple of years. And when you get enough pain or perception of pain in your life that you realize that I can control this, and you cut back the things. You can't do everything at once. But I also think you can do more things than you think you can as well. So part of it's psychological.
So are you focused on kind of multiple ventures right now, or do you kind of have a number that you always like, maybe just 2 at a time? Or
the way I have explained it to my colleagues before is I can do 2 large projects and 1 small one at the same time.
Okay.
So 2 large projects would be like, my job with Praxis and writing my book. And then the small project could be I want to build a really simple app using Swift and learning something on Amazon Web Services that would allow me to do that, right? If I do more than that, then the wheels start to fly off.
Yeah. Okay. What's a book that you would recommend to us and why?
A lot of books. Depends on
it could be a couple
the
or a few.
Yeah. If you're looking for a book on becoming focused and the importance of focus, it's kind of cheesy. And I really, really hate the notes that the editor put in it. And I, so much so that as I went through the book, I X'd them out, that they were so annoying to me. But Napoleon Hill's Outwitting the Devil is very, very good. It's written as this narrative with the devil, right? And it's as if, okay, if you were having a conversation with a being that literally defines evil, what things would that being say? And one of the things that he hits on repeatedly throughout the book is, Hill says he actually had this conversation. Whether or not you want to believe that is totally up to you. But one of the things he notes is that when people don't have definiteness of purpose, they don't know what they're getting up for in the day. They don't know what they're working towards. And there are a couple of tools that he uses for that. Some of those tools are parents, religion, and schools. And supposedly this book was written in like the 40s and it had to be kept under lock and key because if it had come out, Hill would have been accused of being a communist and dragged through the streets, and it wasn't published until the 90s. Because there is some real controversial stuff in it. Kind of self-helpy, but really great little book in that regard. Similar vein is C.S. Lewis's The Great Divorce. Especially if you're listening to this and you're thinking about dropping out. It is a narrative about people who go from hell to heaven, and they have the choice to go to heaven, and they find all the reasons to go back to hell. They step off the bus in heaven, and they realize the sun's too bright. Oh, the grass hurts my feet, and they find all these reasons to go back to what's comfortable, but what is at the end of the day hell. I think that's a great narrative, given this topic in particular. Peter Thiel's 0 to 1 is very good. I highly recommend that, especially the first half of it on competition. And, I can recommend books on financial literacy. I can recommend books on, actually how to start a startup. Any of your readers, they can tweet at me, or listeners, they can tweet at me or email me, and I can shoot more stuff their way.
Okay. So we're running out of time here, but really quick, some parting words of advice for people listening who are thinking of dropping out. They haven't quite made that step yet.
1, you don't need to make the entire leap at once if you don't have to. Everyone knows that you can take a leave of absence from your school. Believe it or not, most schools will not penalize you. They will not take away your financial aid or your scholarships. So in which case, your downside of taking a semester off and going and working in a great job that makes you come alive, or even a job that you hate where you realize, I don't want to do this anymore. What's the downside? That's the question I would ask them. Why are you putting yourself through this? 2, why are you putting yourself through this? Why are you there? Seriously, do you have a compelling reason that you are there that is not, I need it because I want to become a doctor, lawyer, academic, or my parents will literally track me down and shoot me if I drop out, which unfortunately I want to laugh at that, but a lot of parents are stupidly psychopathic about this because they don't know how to be parents, and they're how I'm going to define my definition of being a good parent is I need to make sure my child gets a degree and then my life is fulfilled, which I find a ridiculously shallow interpretation of parenthood. I'm feeling cranky today.
That's great. It's good stuff.
The third one would be just do something. If the way that you plan on selling yourself, whether you graduate or not, is based on your credentials, get out of my office right now. That's not impressive to me. I've seen cover letters recently that are, I am qualified for this job because I have a degree in this and I took X, Y, and Z classes. Okay, what did you do in those classes? Okay, what value did you add to somebody's life? Even if it was like mock value that you added as part of an experiment in that class. That doesn't signal anything to me. You need to tell me more than that. So go out there and do something. One, like I said, creation begets creation. You're going to start developing that bias fraction that school largely trains out of you. And two, even if you fail, you're going to learn a lot along the way. Again, school trains fear of failure into people, though, too. So,
Zach, what's the best way that people can get a hold of you?
I am on Twitter at Slayback, Slayback. My email address is Zach, Z-A-K, at Slayback, Slayback.xyz. And then my website is Zach Slayback, same spelling as everything else, .com. I blog on there relatively regularly. I do audio recordings, audio blogs some days. And you can find me on Facebook as well. If you shoot me a message and say, hey, I heard you on the podcast, I'll add you as a friend.
Awesome. Well, successful dropouts, you've been hanging out with Zach and Kylan, learning what it takes to drop out, grind, and succeed. For everything we talked about today, head over to successfuldropout.com and type Zach into the search bar, and the show notes will pop right up. And as always, stay hungry, stay foolish.